So these poems that I'm reading here are my own versions of the Hafiz poems that I first took a literal translation of the poems and then reworked them so that they're presented in English with the same spirit, though not the literal letter of the original verse. Because his poems in Persian had a great complexity to them that need to be recaptured with the English language in a way that can't be done just by a literal translating. Some of these poems, when you read them at first, if you're not experienced with Sufi poetry techniques, they might seem a bit confusing because they use the Sufi method of instruction. They're meant to break down the usual patterns of thought of the person who reads them or listens to them. They're meant to provoke a kind of inner contemplation that'll affect the conscious and the subconscious awareness at the same time. So these teachings are teachings that have a lot of different layers. On the one layer, there's the literal dimension of the poem being a poem about a woman or about getting drunk. And then these layers have a symbolic meaning to them, where the symbolism of the wine is meant to be the divine experience, and the beloved that Hafiz is seeking is the divine itself. And then beyond that, there's another dimension to the poetry connected to the whole quest for awakening, the whole spiritual, mystical quest. And these poems will work on the same person at different levels at the same time. So Hafiz's poems aren't so much like a painting that you can look at them and just admire them all, the whole thing in one glance. They're more like a sculpture that have multiple dimensions and depth. So when you're studying Hafiz's poems or any other spiritual teaching, especially something done in an artistic style, the first thing you want to do is to try to read it literally without looking for any special metaphor, and make sure you understand what it's saying at the literal level. Then try to read it again, looking at each couplet separately to try to get a special message out of each couplet of what kind of the instruction is for the spiritual student. And then finally read the whole poem as a whole the third time, trying to tie together and understand the various parts to get a complete perspective. And when you read it, you want to read, especially by the end of it, you want to be reading it and imagine if you have to try to explain these insights from the poem to somebody else. And that should give you a good idea of just how deep you've managed to get into the poem. The Sufi poetry and spiritual teachings in general will approach each person at the level that they are. So you might understand one thing or take one thing out of one of these poems at this time. And if you were to look again at the same poem later on in your life, if you've been working at your own evolution, you're going to see something different there. You're going to see another level that you wouldn't have captured the first time, because the secrets aren't hidden in some kind of a secret code. They're hidden in the level of comprehension that the reader can possibly have based on their own level of awareness.